Most of us take electricity for granted. We flip the switch and the lights go on. But what we might not know is how the lights stay on.
Power stations run 24/7.
Primarily they're running 24/7.
Power plants run 24/7.
Actually, that's not true. All power plants shut down occasionally, including big coal and nuclear plants. To make sure the lights stay on when these plants shut down, we have the electric grid, a vast, interconnected system of power plants and transmission lines that can move electricity where it's needed, when it's needed.
The grid has to be balanced at all times. The balancing of load means that the supply of electricity has to meet the demand of electricity.
I think we could have renewable energy, but we would still need power plants in order to have it consistent.
In fact, there are people whose job it is to make sure the flow of electricity is consistent. They're known as grid operators, and their job is to keep the lights on. Whether the supply is old coal and nuclear power plants or newer wind farms and solar panels, grid operators keep the whole system in balance.
My name is Andy Ott. I work for PJM, and our job is to keep the lights on. The PJM market and grid operations covers a 14-state region. We coordinate the reliable delivery of power to over 60 million customers. The role of PJM in managing power grid operations is essentially like an air traffic controller in the airline industry.
The grid operators' high-tech control centers monitor electricity supply and demand. With a few computer clicks, they can increase or decrease electricity generation across the grid.
The PJM control room gathers an immense amount of information on a second-by-second, minute-by-minute basis. We essentially have operational tools that allow the grid operators to visualize the complete picture of the state of the power grid at any given instant in time.
Managing supply and demand may seem like a problem, especially if you're relying on the sun or wind as a source of power. But changes in the sun and wind typically take place over an hour or two, not instantaneously. Plus, they are predictable through weather forecasting, which means grid operators have plenty of notice if they need to find other sources of power. What matters to the grid operator is total demand and supply, not any single generation source or individual consumer. And it helps if the region is very large. A large geographic balancing area gives the grid operator many different supply options to choose from. Imagine if a wind farm or solar panels were the only source of power for one town. When the wind blows and the sun shines, the town would have all the power it needs. But when that stops, they would need backup generators or batteries, or else the lights might go off. Now imagine if that town and its renewable energy sources were connected to other towns and their power plants across a regional balancing area. Now, when the wind dies down, the town can draw from hundreds of other interconnected power supplies, and the lights stay on. The grid operator makes all this happen. When the sun is shining and wind blowing, renewable power flows across the system. If the wind dies down or clouds block out the sun, grid operators simply turn on other power plants or borrow electricity from another part of the balancing area with extra supply. Today, about 75% of our electricity in the United States comes from burning of fossil fuels like coal and gas. Renewables like wind, solar, hydropower, biomass, and geothermal generate around 13% of all electricity consumed in the U.S. Renewables have contributed more than 20% of all electricity in states like California, Iowa, and Texas. In fact, experts predict renewables could someday generate 50 to 80% of America's electricity. With all of the new technologies used to increase the amount of renewable energy on the grid, there's one technique that's familiar to almost everyone: a weather forecast.
So the forecasting for both wind and solar has made enormous advances. If you know that there's going to be a period of great wind production, the forecasters are now able to determine what resources will be needed. If there's going to be an increase in wind production, you can back off some of the gas turbines to accommodate and balance the grid. If you know that in 2 hours there's going to be stillness, you have the ability to plan to offset the drop in wind resources during that particular time of day.
So as America uses more renewable energy, grid operators and the advanced technology they use can help us continue moving toward a clean energy future and make sure the lights stay on.